get time to do that. Hello, and we are live. Hi. So, welcome everyone to Love in the Stars. And I'm Lizanne, and I am joined today by Shadi. Do you want
Hi,
to introduce
everybody.
yourself?
Introduce myself. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Shadi. I am an astrologer, energy worker, and a soothsayer. And I'm excited to be talking to Lizanne today about romance and the stars. So,
Yes, it's very exciting and it's lovely to have you. And just for our viewers, I am wondering, my Instagram is having problems,
oh
but I'm still
no.
streaming elsewhere. Anyway, so we'll have to follow on yours. Looks like
Okay.
yours is still working.
Okay. Okay.
So, for the listeners out there, I am wondering if you could tell people, what is a soothsayer?
Aha. So a soothsayer, the definition of it is it's a really old word, old English word, and it means one who can foresee the future. Now, that's the very basic definition of it, but in reality, what it means is someone who speaks the truth. And
Hmm.
so you can interpret truth however way you like. For me, it is, the truth, meaning an aligned truth. So it's a spiritual truth, factual truth, like all those things combined together. So I really love that term. It's always kind of sat with me as opposed to like psychic or medium or fortune teller. It just sits right with me because I think you're the same way as I am. We tend to speak truth when it comes to, we don't sugarcoat, we don't
Yeah.
we tell it like it is.
Great. Yeah, I love that. That's a great title to use. And I'm the same. I don't consider myself a psychic. Intuitive, yes, of course, but I think that everybody has access to intuition if they choose to use it and to tap into it. But I always wonder a little bit about the use of the word psychic.
Mhm.
Not that, of course, I'm not going to deny that there is a psychic connection and that some people are able to tap into that, but it's just always felt a little bit like I don't even understand what that means exactly. So yeah, I love the idea of a soothsayer, and it is a very old term, and I love that too because astrology is so ancient, and the kind of astrology that we both practice is more Hellenistic astrology, ancient astrology, and I love that connection with the ancestors and with the deep past, and that thought that when we look up at the stars, it's the same sky that people have been looking at for thousands and thousands of years.
Definitely. It's immense when you think about it.
Mm.
Like, I mean, and we've been doing this for eons, just looking up and trying to make sense of ourselves here in relation to these energies that very much there's patterns, and there was observations that we made as humanity over centuries. So there are these deep truths
Mhm.
um, to our connection to the cosmos and the universe because they've been observed and they've been noted and just for millennia
Mhm.
and be as it may, in the times we're in, where pop everything is and I'm not knocking it or anything, but there is definitely ancient roots to this that we can, as much as we want to make it into sort of a fun pop memes, like there is this layer of truth to it that is really undeniable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's another connection that we share is that it's very much a spiritual practice for both of us. I think that's true for
Yes.
you, right? Yeah. And I'll just mention to anybody who's watching this live that how we met, because actually we've never met in
No.
person. No, we're just Instagram friends. And it's interesting how you can make those kinds of connections. I just was drawn to your posts, your writing, and your perspective. And it's interesting how you can really get a strong sense of a person over social media.
It's so true. It just always goes back to energy. Like I think when we're kind of connected in those ways, and when we're grounded and not swayed, because the energies can be so hectic on social media, you're
Mm-hmm.
really able to connect with I call, cut from the same light beam, or the same from the same like spirit family. Like you just you gravitate towards certain people. I've met many folks that way that I've never met in person, and I
Mhm.
literally am like, I think we're friends. I mean, I feel like there's that depth and connection.
Yeah.
And same with you. I know we both, and we're gonna, as we get into talking about love and love in the stars, I love your perspective on things, because I think there's a similarity we have where um, we sort of like to get to the deeper meaning, to
Mhm.
the deeper meaning of it, to the part where we're not just like, oh, um, you know, uh, this is a
Not
great
just
love
saying
year.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, there's
Yeah.
there's
Moving past the cliches and the formulas and the yeah.
exactly.
Right, because it is a spiritual thing, and so how do we tap into the deeper meanings here, and how do we make meaning of our lives? Because for me, that's what astrology is doing. It's a framework, that allows me to make meaning of my life, and to help others find that meaning as well. So yeah.
Exactly. Making meaning. And then, for me, it's also important to show people that you can work with the energies. They're not just static, and they're not
Mhm.
just there, and nothing happens per se to us. Um, they're all opportunities and moments to self-reflect, use it to our advantage on a personal level, and of course, collective level. Also, there's messages for us in a bigger way. But definitely, I agree with you. It's a spiritual practice. It's such an amazing a tool is the I don't have the right word for it. I guess
Mhm.
it's a way to better oneself. It's a way to connect deeper
Yes.
with oneself. It's a way to, and that's really the core of manifestation anyway, right? I mean, we don't just things that, um, if they're great energies for love in a particular moment in time for someone, as you and I had talked about, it doesn't necessarily mean that will transpire if we're not ready to make the most of those energies, which is why working with an astrologer is really beautiful. And one of the things the ancients did do was meet with astrologers on a regular basis, and it wasn't just a here and there. It was like they were part of the day to day. Like,
Right.
how do I, and I mean, different reasons for different moments in our history. Sure, people wanted to know when there was famines, or when there was going to be a flood, or things that were a little more external. But we're living in times when there's a lot of internal spiritual importance to us as humanity. It's important for us, and so astrology has now taken even a deeper meaning in people's lives day to day, to
Mhm.
find these,
I totally agree with you. And now you did bring up our topic of the day, so I
yeah,
think I'm going to
get into it.
introduce that love in the stars. So that is what we were decided to talk about today, partly because Valentine's Day is coming up, and partly because everybody's always interested in love, right?
Yeah,
And
exactly.
astrology does have a lot to say about this. I was actually preparing a course on love in astrology, and I realized it was going to be a short course, and I realized I can't do this in a couple of weeks. It actually has to be a few weeks, 6 to 8 weeks or something, to really dive into the topic of love, because there's so much to look at. There's so many variables. And as astrologers, we're looking at archetypes, when we're looking at symbols and we're interpreting these symbols, and they can manifest in so many different ways. And it's not just Venus, or it's
Mhm.
not just your seventh house, but all of those aspects to Venus,
Mhm.
and strong signatures in the birth chart as well, which are totally going to change the way that you approach love, the way that you express love, the way that you receive and accept love as well.
Absolutely. And there, for me, one of the important things that I always look at in the chart of clients is the condition of their planets as well. And you and I talked about this. And for folks that don't know out there, in traditional astrology or Hellenistic astrology, we really look at the condition of a planet. Sort of, is it, for lack of a better word, is it debilitated? Is it strong? Is it weak? Does it need support? And that's based on a set of criteria that we use to analyze and come up with that. So in some charts, for example, when your Venus is retrograde, it's you're
Mhm.
born with, during a Venus retrograde. I often have found that there are folks, things kind of unravel slowly for folks over time. Like it takes them a very long time to come into that growth around, I mean, love and loving. The planet Venus represents how we also value ourselves, our worth. So much about how we love others and want to be loved by others has to do with how much we love ourselves. And I find that it's a longer journey for some folks that have
Mhm.
that retrograde Venus. And so there's a lot of, there's a lot there. And as well, you and I again have talked about how this is a big sort of, not a misconception, but it's kind of a misleading of sorts, where in pop astrology, most of the time the focus goes so much on signs,
Mm.
and signs are great, but they're like the adjectives to the nouns, which are the planets and the
Yes,
points in the
yes,
chart. So it's one thing when folks will be like, and I love that people know the signs and they understand it. It's a great place always for me to start with clients. But it's this thing where, well, I'm a Leo and I'm not going to get along with an Aquarius, so
right,
forget,
yes.
that's a terrible match. And I'm like, nope.
No, I know. Yeah, you're
No.
right. And it's I agree with something you said a little earlier. This goes back to pop astrology, and that in a way it's popularized astrology, and it's made more people turned onto it than ever before. But at the same time, we get these stereotypes. The signs are very, very much stereotyped by people, and actually what people need to realize is that we all have
Mhm.
all 12 signs
Yeah.
in our charts and in our lives and in ourselves. We are all a combination of these 12 signs, as well as all of these placements and aspects of the planets and whatnot. So it is so complex and so much more than just what your sun sign is, and
Exactly.
so much more than what your Venus sign is.
Exactly. Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that's really crucial to look at in a chart, when it comes to love and loving as well, is like your moon. Your moon is so important. It's
Mm.
that inner world, that sort of um, uh, who is a good fit for me. Oftentimes, I'm looking at people's moon and wondering, like, you know, are you more inclined to be like, what is your love language? Essentially, for me,
Mm.
the moon really gives that away. I don't know what you think about that, but whenever it comes to synastry readings or just like talking about compatibility and love matches, it's like the moon is so key. Um,
Yeah.
uh, and it's, for me, it's less about the sun sign. In fact, I'm always like, okay, that's interesting. That's well and good. Rising sign is
Mhm.
well and good, but like, let's really look at the moon and
Yeah.
Venus, of course. But
Yeah, I think you're right about the moon, because that is so tender. I always think of the moon as the little child emotionally inside of us, and it can be so very reactive, and it's so very much it's in some ways the core of our emotional being. And so how others touch us and how we touch others and what we need, because moon is needs as well, right? And nurture and all of those things. So
Mhm.
yeah, moon is incredibly important. And placement of the moon, for example, I have a debilitated moon. I have moon in Scorpio, which is the moon in its fall, but I have moon in the first house. So this really increases the importance of the moon. And my Venus, for example, is in Aries.
Mhm,
Another
mhm.
debilitated. I'm the queen of debilitated planets.
Sorry.
But I find that that Scorpio moon actually is pretty much core to who I am in so many ways.
And you know what's interesting, because when you say that, the debilitated for me is always almost, I love seeing those types of planets in people's charts, because I'm like, well, how can we give it some support? Because I refuse to believe that it's just like it's debilitated and it sucks and that's that. I think, yeah, it's incredibly challenging to have a challenging planet. And yet, like, where can we, and that's my Capricorn who's speaking right now, like, where can
Mm,
we find a way? let's find a way to make this work. But it's that's really key too for me, because some folks will be like, I'm just doomed in my love life. Like, this is, my Venus sucks, my moon sucks. These are these aspects, the connections the planets make are terrible. And I'm always just like, well, yes, and like, let's look at where you can seek support. And that is one of the big things in traditional astrology. It's not just, it's about, let's look at the stronger planets. Are they able to lend support?
yes.
And where can you lean in? What energies can you lean into more? Which planets are favorable for you
Mm. Oh, you've just okay. So Shadi
to
has.
help support the ones that are weak? Did I pop
Yeah,
off?
you just
Am I
stopped for
there?
a
Oh, I
moment, but you're
glitched.
back again. Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
it's that's a really interesting perspective of the support of the other planets, and for me, the debilitated planets. I've come to think about this. Possibly, I've thought a lot about the debilitated planets because I have so many, but also I've come to think that all of these difficult things in our lives, all of these places that we struggle, that actually those turn out to be the source of
Mm,
our great strengths and
mm,
our talents and our treasures and what's really special about us. So I feel like you can really mine those difficult
mm,
placements, and you can squeeze them a little bit to pull out the goodness and get the juice out of those things. So with let's talk about Venus then, since we were talking goddess of
yeah.
love, Venus. Let's
Yeah.
talk about where she's strong and where she is, as we are talking about debilitated.
Yeah.
So you want to start with her home planets?
I
I mean
mean,
signs, sorry.
for sure. So Libra and Taurus, of course. Um, and it's funny because I've seen charts with strong Taurus placements that have so for folks that don't know, your rising sign, the ruler of your rising sign ends up being your chart ruler. So it's sort of a very important, significant planet in your chart. So folks that may have a Taurus rising or a Libra rising will have Venus as the ruler of their planet.
Right.
And sometimes it turns out that while Venus is happy and at home in those signs, it may also not be a favorable planet in someone's chart. So sorry, I mean, maybe I'm going off on a different tangent here, but yes, Venus in those signs is quite happy.
Mhm.
However, I'm going to say dot dot dot. So
Yeah.
it's comfortable there in Taurus. It's I find that iteration of it is very much about tangible, sort of that expression of love that is very tangible, very much earthly,
Sensual. Yeah.
touch,
Yep.
sensual, sensuality, loving in that sort of way that is sensual, sexual, very much expressive in these by way of touch and tangibility.
Yes.
And in Libra, of course, I find there's that sort of intellectual or artistic component to it,
Yeah.
where the touch, the sex, all those things are great. However, there has to be this other sort of level of engagement that's on a mental level and on that connection. I
And
find,
I and idealism too, don't you find with
yes,
Libra?
that's true.
There's a real strong sense of romantic love as an ideal and partnership as an ideal.
Yes,
Yeah, and both of those placements also have their pitfalls. All of the
of
placements have their
course.
pitfalls. So yeah, even though with their Venus is said to be strong in her home planets of Taurus and Libra,
Yep.
doesn't mean that she doesn't have some other problems there.
Well, exactly. I just actually, someone was connecting me about their Venus is actually in their first house in Pisces, so exalted and just very happy. Yet, when we got down to the core of it, that Venus, which should technically be blessed and living its best life where it is in that chart, was making a couple of really difficult aspects, which for
Right.
folks that don't know, they're sacred angles, they're geometric connections between planets, which indicate either ease or challenge. And
Yes.
so there was two difficult connections, actually three, one with Pluto. I can't remember exact details, but there was a couple of other things in there. Uranus, I think, was another one. Neptune was another one.
Hmm.
So we talked a lot about how this person may have kind of rose-colored glasses. There was that Neptune square that may make them sort of fall in that
Yeah.
exalted Pisces, romantic, in love with being in love, and maybe not so, you know. So sure, it's exalted and it's happy in Pisces in the first house, and there's so much more to explore in a person's
Mm-hmm.
chart.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. I love that. And I've seen the same thing. In fact, I've been talking about that now as Venus is in Pisces
Right,
currently.
right.
Yeah. So the rose-colored glasses, and another sign that is quite idealistic when it comes to love, but um, not so comfortable with the nitty gritty and some of the
Hmm.
details and the harder, challenging parts of love, perhaps.
Right.
Yeah. So we mentioned then Libra, Taurus, and Pisces. And so then in traditional astrology, Venus is said to struggle in the signs that are the polar opposite of those three signs. So that would be Aries, Scorpio, and Virgo.
Right.
And so that's interesting, and I like exploring these aspects as well. Venus in Aries, I have that. I know a lot of women with Venus in Aries, and
And we're about to just, it's about to enter Aries on the 20th
yeah,
as well. So
exactly. Yeah.
yay.
I find this placement is not actually so difficult. I haven't struggled with it. I feel like I have a theory that some of these places where a planet is said to be strong has something to do with the ancient mindset and the ancient stereotypes about women and what women should be like and what
Very,
women's roles should be like.
very
And
true.
so Venus in Libra is graceful and charming and diplomatic,
Right.
whereas Venus in Aries tends to be a lot bolder and assertive and direct.
Yeah.
And that is somehow why they say she's debilitated or in detriment in Aries. But today, with women being more, assertive and independent, and with women's rights, I find that's not as difficult a placement anymore, and that when Venus in Aries can get what she wants.
That's so brilliant. I actually didn't really take that in, but until you just brought it up, that is very true. I think it's similar for Venus and Scorpio as well, right? And yet, I will add, though, we're very much, unfortunately, still so like contending with these patriarchal
Hmm.
we've internalized so many of these things,
Yes.
and yet I hear you, and still I find that if Venus and Libra would have a way easier time out in the world in a heteronormative way, though,
Yes.
heteronormative
Yes.
speaking,
Yes.
with in that regard, right? And so
Hmm.
I would love for a world where Venus and Aries is just
Mm.
out there bold and
Well, and Venus and Scorpio is different because and let's not forget that men have these placements too, not just women, right?
of
So
course,
Venus is
absolutely.
men have a Venus in their chart, and Venus represents love and attraction for men just as much as it does for women. And I know men with Venus in Scorpio, and I feel this is a difficult placement for men with Venus in Scorpio because Venus in Scorpio is so intense, and
Mm.
it's this feeling of almost a desperate kind of love
Mm,
that is really, really compelling and really, all consuming
mm,
sometimes. And so that can be a little bit more difficult,
mhm,
perhaps,
mhm,
um,
mhm,
for men. They're not supposed to maybe care, in a patriarchal society. Maybe they're not supposed to be as consumed by love. Um,
And
you
Venus and Pisces, I would say as well, maybe a challenging positionality in a world where men are socialized to not be
mm,
so tender, perhaps, or
yeah,
that's seen as a weakness, you know, and which is, we both know that's absolutely ridiculous, and that both these energies live in all of us,
mhm,
the masculine and the feminine. And so, but but in reality we're socialized in those ways, so how they
mhm,
play out with the clients we speak with and talk to, you're absolutely right about that. I have to say, I don't always tend to get a lot of clients that are men, or identify as men. I don't, that it's very much something I would love, I would love more of. I think living in this time of, I call it the Neptune and Pisces world that we're in right now. I think people are way more open to these types of things, which is great. Everybody is.
mhm.
And so I do think it's important to look at these planets from that.
Both sides.
Yeah, because I think as we were talking, I had a certain set in my mind of my typical clients, which
Right.
tends to be mostly
Yeah.
women and them. So yeah.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I have more, not more men, but I have a fair number of male clients, which I love too. And I don't know why that is. Maybe because I'm so Marsy myself. I don't
Possibly. It's true.
So, okay, so we've talked about Libra and Taurus and Scorpio, Aries, Pisces, and Virgo. We were going to talk about Virgo.
Yes.
Yeah, what's your take on Venus in Virgo?
So funnily, because I have a Virgo rising, so before anybody comes through the chats and says anything bad about Virgos, I'll let you know. I got a soft spot. It's my rising. I will say, it's an interesting one with Virgo. I have someone very close to me who has Venus and Virgo, and I find they are really incredible in terms of their artistry and how they run their business. So this isn't love connected. This is the business Venus. This is the Venus that's like, I'm going to present things out into the world. They're a musician, and you can just see the Virgo,
Yes.
the detailiness of things, the
Yes.
perfectionism, the focus on the little things that most people don't pay attention to come through. So I think that it's a double-edged sword with when we talk about love and loving, because Venus in Virgo can get really fixated on the nitty-gritty.
Mm,
Um, and it may need to kind of pull out a little bit and look at the bigger picture, as opposed to so it could almost be like, depending again on the chart, because the whole
yeah.
thing, it could be that it could be a suffocating type of love, Venus and Virgo. It could be a dominating type of love. It could be I'm going to tell you this is how things should be, like a more so, or a very passive aggressive type of love, which again, Venus, when it is not expressive in Virgo, can really um,
Mm,
critical,
mm,
self-criticism, and critical of partner and self, of the whole. So it, to me, it's just speaking very truthfully, it's more of um a little bit of a uptight type of Venus.
right.
Sorry to say that. I'm a Virgo rising.
Totally Virgos.
A
And
little bit
and the thing about that is historically, so Venus is said to be in her fall in Virgo. And the reason for that is because Virgo is so concerned with details and with perfecting things, that all of and so analytical, that gets in the way of sensuality. That
there you
if you're so in your head and analyzing every detail, are you really enjoying the moments that you're
go. That's
in?
right.
And I think that's part of it. But something I'll say about Virgo, I think Virgo is the most underappreciated sign. And one of the things I love about Virgo and Venus in Virgo is these acts of service. Like the way that Virgo just shows up and does what needs to be done. And that doesn't get enough appreciation, in my opinion. That is where Venus and Virgo can really excel. Is that is just I know somebody who had a partner who passed away recently with strong Virgo placements. And after the death, the partner realized all of the things that Virgo partner took care of that they didn't even know about. It's just behind the scenes, not asking for a lot of attention or thanks, and
Yes.
getting things done. And, that's for, a busy person, a partner like that could be very valuable to have, right?
I feel like the love language of Virgo, Venus and Virgo, is like acts of service, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I
Yeah.
think that's kind of a nice way to talk about it for folks that may not know the archetypes well. And I think that
Yeah.
that's exactly it. Venus
Yeah.
and Virgo is like acts of service.
Mhm.
It's through what it does for others. Similar to maybe also Venus and Cancer a little bit too, where they come together and they almost too much, perhaps in Cancer's case of like acts of nurturing,
Yes.
over nurturing. If it's not aligned, that could be a suffocating Venus as well. Um, if it's not an aligned, it's not
Right.
doing so good. Um, but I do want to talk about Venus and Leo because I think that I want to give a good example because that's where my Venus is. And
Mhm.
this is where I feel, someone just said, I feel like, my Virgo husband. So sweet. That's so sweet. Yes. Oh, the details,
Wow.
the
Yeah.
behind the scenes. But I want to talk about that for one quick second again for folks that are with us right now. Just because when you kind of like again pop astrology or if you get sort of those app breakdowns of things which aren't exactly detailed to your entire chart and again the condition of your planets. For me, having that Venus in Leo, you would think super passionate and expressive and loves passionate lover and
Mhm.
all these things. But hold on a second. Now, maybe I'm going to be a bit vulnerable here with everybody, but that's not who I am. I'm very passionate and yet got to consider all the other things. I
Right.
have Mars in Virgo. I've got a Virgo rising.
Mhm.
I'm contained. I'm very contained. I'm also a Cancer sun. So
Mhm.
again, I'm very cautious. I'm very careful with how I love. And so what else is going on is that my Venus in Leo is in the 12th house.
Okay.
So is that a house that wants to be expressive and show itself? No, it's more intense and internal. It makes me a poet. It makes me get intense about all those Venus things about
And your
love and loving.
spirituality.
About
Yeah, I
exactly
love
right.
that. And you bring up such an important point there is the house totally changes how it expresses. And what I love too that you bring up is how it's never one thing. It's
No,
always, all of the placements are a big mixture of positive and negative or good and bad, mature, immature, it's always so complex and complicated. And that's what makes us also special and unique. And I
exactly.
also am really interested to hear more about Venus in Leo because
Mm.
this is a year of Venus in Leo. We are going to have a big Venus retrograde in Leo this summer. And I really think Venus is the star of the show this summer. And it
Oh,
is all
yeah.
about Venus in Leo.
Yeah, there's going to be some reckonings for me in my chart for sure. Some things I got some shadow work coming up. I will also say another addition to what you're saying, the wonderful things that you're saying is that, we say it's complex and complicated, and yet also it doesn't have to be like it's both Lizanne and I are I think, I don't want to speak for you, but I think that we want to kind of demystify astrology as well and not gatekeep, because it's a language that we all know. Like it's in our bones. It's in our DNA. We're of the stars. We're of the cosmos. So in many ways, I find of all the intuitive arts, astrology is the most gatekeepy, because there is such a methodology to it and so much detail. And yes, it's perfect for certain the way certain brains work, and it's a language that comes easily for some more than others. However, I want people to know that that connection is very much there anyway. It's like yeah, so I'm often always trying to find ways to talk about these things that people can relate to without watering it down.
Right.
And so another thing I want to add is that, what Lizanne and I are really saying about this is that it matters the condition of your planet, how well it is, how strong it is, how weak it is. So when we're talking about love and we're looking at Venus, it really matters how the Venus in your chart is. And then we talked about how it matters. So what sign it's in. Is it again strong in that sign? Is it not strong in that sign? And there's a whole bunch of other factors that come into play around the condition of a planet. And then we talked about the house. All 12 houses are not all cut the same way. Some are not great houses, some are more blessed houses. So again, the 12th house where my Venus is a kind of a challenging house for Venus to be, as opposed to your first house.
Yes.
So those things matter. And in addition to that, it matters what connection your planet Venus is making to other planets. So when I have Saturn right up against my Venus, well,
Oh,
you
now
know,
you're just making me feel sorry for you, Shadi.
right? I had some love challenges in my life. I have.
I love
So,
that, and it's important to talk about that, because I think the aspects to the outer planets are really important. So just as when she says to me, saying this to anybody who's listening, when Shadi tells me her Venus is next to Saturn, that immediately tells me something. And what I think about is that there is an inhibition. That would be the first thing that would come to my mind, is that Saturn inhibits that Venus a little bit. So it's such an interesting combination with the big, showy, fiery, we would think,
right?
Venus in Leo, but she's in the place of secrets. She's in the place of isolation and retreat. And she's next to Saturn, who's putting pressure on her and dampening down her expression and making her more serious and perhaps more thoughtful as well, and more careful. And it can also even it can even prevent you from expressing yourself to the point where some people, or at some point in your life, you've probably struggled with loneliness.
100%.
Yes. So, I mean, this is really important, the connection of Venus to the outer planets, I find. Do you agree with that?
I agree so much. And on top of that, it's like as I was saying, and to maybe others who've joined us later, for example, we're actually coming up on the 15th to a planetary aspect collectively in the sky, transits, between Neptune and Venus, and they're making a conjunction. So this actually, I was just talking about someone else's chart earlier who has this iteration in their own chart, and it's just a heads up to everybody that this is a very rose-colored glasses connection between Venus loses its sense of clarity and falls hopelessly in love, in like just it's like hearts, hearts, hearts.
Yeah.
And so this is a collective planetary aspect that we're coming across, sort of, but this is playing out somewhere in our charts as well. But you want to, yeah, exactly. You want to pay attention to what some of those other planets, how are they connecting with the Venus in your chart? And as well, is that Venus strong enough to, if that is already a weak Venus, then how is it going to withstand something like a square, a conjunction, an opposition, some of those more kind of intense connections? And on top of that, as astrologers, what Lizanne and I do is we look at transits, we do transit readings, and we look at what's currently happening in the sky and what's that activating in people's
Mm,
love lives. So yes, we could talk about a chart. So we both do. We both always, I mean, I always love to do a natal chart before a transit for people, just to get to know who you are and what your tendencies are, what your cosmic makeup is. And then we look at transits because there's some moments where we are, for example, let's say there's a hard Neptune aspect happening to your Venus, may not be the greatest time to pick a partner that you want to engage with in a long-term way, because you may not have the clarity,
yes,
and or you may need a heads up on that from your astrologer to say,
right.
listen,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah. And the other thing is that we can compare charts and we can look at the other person's chart as well and see how they connect or don't connect. You guys can put your comments in the box if you like, if you want to know where this Venus and Neptune conjunction is happening for you, and we can tell you where that's happening. But yeah, looking at the other person's chart. So if we compare two charts and we see how they make connections to one another, this is called synastry.
Mhm.
And this is another thing that astrology can do. And it's very fun for predicting. Now, I don't think it's good at predicting the success of a relationship, but I think it's good at predicting some of the ways that you will interact as a partnership. So, for example, I think, Venus, we're talking about Venus today, and we were talking about the moon. Well, the moon and Venus together somewhat can very much represent our feeling nature.
Mhm.
And so if you've got those those planets in sort of tender places, and then you get involved with somebody who's running roughshod over your feelings, this is going to be a hurtful connection. And that's a kind of thing that we can see with the way that the charts correspond. Or for example, communication styles are very important, like the Mercury styles.
Mhm.
If I'm looking at at synastry and I'm comparing two charts, so much can be affected by the way that we communicate with one another. And you can have all the love in the world and all of the great feelings in the world, and you can have wonderful sex. But if you can't communicate, or
Right.
if you're communicating in ineffective ways or
Mhm.
hurtful ways,
Mhm.
you're going to kill that love, right?
Yeah, because if you want something long term, then it moves really beyond the sun sign and the rising sign. It gets a little bit the Venus. My partner is also a Venus and Leo in the
Mm,
seventh house, and the way and you would think, oh well, so much passion between the two of us, and yet um, we've been together for so many years, and when the challenging moments happen, then when you look at the rest of our chart, it makes so much sense where we go into our ways of being, that in a long-term way we need to kind of like address or figure out, because at the very beginning, when it's a honeymoon phase and you're passionate about someone,
mm,
that is all very much like sun sign, rising sign, your Venus is connecting, the magnetism there, the
mm,
attraction there. And then there's that piece where I believe things are not doomed for people in general. I see ways in which my own awareness about my chart and my partner's chart has allowed us to be stronger. I've connected with people on where things you either just agree to let that person be.
yes,
Like for example, there's someone that has a Libra rising, very social person, very much needs to connect and be out in the world and do things with a partner who's an introvert, who absolutely is very possessive and likes to,
mm,
they hold a lot of those shadow aspects of um, of the various planets and signs in their chart. And so we were able to have like a very honest, open conversation. Mind you, their partner was a little like, what is this?
yeah,
By the end of it, they were like, mind was blown, because it's such a deep,
yeah,
it's such a deep way to talk about our lives that almost gives a little distance from, it almost like gives you a bit of a break, because you're like, well, it's kind of like my cosmic makeup, and I'm able to work with those energies. Like it's not, you know
Absolutely.
what I mean? It's very empowering in my opinion.
I
As
agree. I totally agree. I mean, well, you've seen my chart, Shadi. So
yeah,
you know, I am somebody who has so many debilitated planets in my chart. And when I first started to learn about that, I was just floored. It was a shock and it was depressing, But then you start to learn, like I was saying, about, oh, there's always a good side. Every single one of these placements and these difficult things, the challenging things, there is always some sort of treasure to be mined there. And with those difficult connections too, for example, if you look at synastry, you might say squares are difficult, or oppositions between two people are difficult. These are called the hard aspects and they're considered challenging. And yet there's such an opportunity for growth with those hard aspects in a chart.
agreed.
It's just
Agreed.
you can go places that you never could go alone if you didn't have somebody who was challenging you in that way.
It's so true what you say, because then there's those easier aspects, the sextiles and the trines, and sometimes people get so complacent in their relationships and they're just like, meh,
Yeah.
where's the passion? Where's
Hmm.
the fire? Where's a little bit of like static that, gives life to a connection with someone? So
Right.
none of it is good or bad as per what the ancients used to say to us, because we've grown as humanity, right? So I mean, it's not like good or bad, doomed or not. We have different ways of understanding these things because we want to grow and be better people, better versions of ourselves, in partnership and
Mhm.
for ourselves. And synastry is a great, I can't really recommend it enough. I know it's hard, because both folks have to be on board to come and do something like that. I've had people tell me, will you do a synastry with, I tend not to, I don't think for me it's ethical to do someone's chart when they're not there. People will ask, but my partner is da da da. And I'm like, nah, I don't know. Like I can
Oh,
give you, yeah, I'm not doing someone's chart when they're not
I
present.
will I will totally do that. So
Really?
yeah,
Well,
oh yeah, I will totally do that.
seriously, you will do that?
Well, you know what? I'm just so nosy. It's like every time somebody comes to me, I want to know. I want to pull up their chart immediately because I
Oh
mean,
my
it's
God.
the perfect job for a nosy
Okay.
person, being an astrologer, right?
How
'Cause
Virgo-y of me is that though? Like Virgo, like,
no, but
no, we cannot
I
do
we're
that.
not going to. I'm definitely with a client. I'm going to ask that they have permission from their partner. But
Okay, okay.
yeah, but I would definitely look at it aside because I think there's value in it.
True.
Even aside from sometimes the partner's not interested, they are dismissive of it, they want nothing to do with it,
Yeah.
whatever. But I don't think that, like you were saying earlier about being a gatekeeper. I mean, this is,
True.
I'm not approaching it from any sort of a judgmental kind of way. It's always with a view to like uncovering things and how can we, as you say, work with the energies and how can you get some better insight. Like for me, looking at people's charts, I am always filled with compassion for the people that I'm reading for. Like
Mhm.
it's never done the opposite for me. I always come away with a
Same,
deeper
for
feeling
sure.
of love and compassion and respect for the person because I can see their challenges
Mm,
and I can see what's hard for them.
mm,
And also often how great people are doing. Like I think people don't
mm.
always realize how great they're doing with what they've got here.
Very
Um,
true. Very true.
so yeah, so I will totally look at
Mhm.
the partner's chart if they have permission to share it.
That's what I meant. I mean, I mostly meant the permission part, but I've literally had people who are dating asking me to look at other people's charts and
Oh
to
yeah.
tell me if this is worth it or not. And that's the part where I'm like, I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Well, it's not a good idea
It's,
either.
I,
Not
yeah.
not even for the absent partner, but for the partner there, you
Right.
know.
Right.
It's not even a good idea for that person when they're just dating to be, because a little bit of knowledge can be a dangerous thing. And so I find with people who just have a cursory understanding of, signs and, aspects and these things, sometimes it's just they just latch on to some of the stereotypes and some of the negatives and that sort of thing without getting the rounded full
Around.
picture of.
And also for me, it feels like you're going through someone's cell phone. Like I honestly just feel that's what it feels like to me because I'm like, even if you want me to give you an in-depth analysis, I'm not going to peek into somebody's. It's
Mm,
so personal. Charts are so
yeah,
personal. I literally lock my clients like they are in my computer with a lock and key. I know nobody cares,
yeah,
but it's so personal because for you and I, when we look at someone's chart, we have such a glimpse into, we go somewhere else with it. It's
yeah.
like there's a meme where this woman is looking and there's all these like numbers and math equations. Like literally my brain will look at a chart and it lights up with so much information about someone from literally like parent things and childhood things and deep trauma stuff and all
Mm,
this information comes at me. And and so it's personal, it's private. And
mhm.
so, in that regard, when it comes to love stuff, I'm like, just ask, as you said, ask somebody, get that permission, and
Yeah,
let's go. Because then it's worthwhile to know. But more importantly, I think it's worthwhile to know your own chart around
yes,
love and loving. As you said, less concerned
absolutely.
with who's out there, what's going on. Because when you know yourself well, then you make decisions. You can base your
Right.
decisions on that. Why do
That's
you need to know the other
absolutely.
person's compatibility?
And I
Because,
I
you know,
think that's one of the other great things that a reading can do for you is it can also help you with some of the blocks. It can explore some of those things. Now, people don't always want to do that, and they're not always willing to go there. But
mhm,
if have a client or a friend for that matter who seems like they're always saying they want to be in love but they're never in love.
mhm,
I start wondering, well, what are you putting out there? Like, how are you blocking yourself from that experience?
mhm,
Because I think being able to honestly have those discussions and look at some of those things in the chart, that's some of the way that we can move forward, and we're not just doomed, to live out these fated relationships or these negative patterns over and over again, but to
exactly.
become aware, right, of
Exactly.
what we're doing, how we're contributing to the people, the relationships, and how we're attracting certain people to our lives, or how we are finding ourselves attracted to the wrong people for whatever reason.
I do want to say we must do a part two of this because I know we don't want to go on. We were like 30 minutes, 45
Yeah, I
minutes, but
can't believe how fast this has gone. It's been
there's so
insane.
much to talk about. We got to do a part two because I also really want to talk about um, how folks will, oftentimes will want you to tell them when is a good love connection
Mm,
time for them or when they're going to meet their partner. And I know that traditionally those things happened, and I think there's certain approaches to astrology, like predictive astrology. There's things that folks do that kind of go into that realm of the psychic stuff, what you and I were talking about. And um, yeah, I would love for us to. I know we don't have time, but I think you and I are from that vein of like know yourself and make good
mhm,
decisions, make
mhm,
favorable decisions, as opposed to this is it. Because someone I know was told that last year was going to be a great year for them, and they were just baffled when it didn't transpire that way in their love life. And so I try to stay away from that. Yet
mhm.
I will definitely tell people this is a great energy wise. This is a good year. So let's do the shadow work. I say I always want to call myself a shadow worker before anything else. And
Yeah,
I know the Scorpios out there will really appreciate that. Because I just cannot, you cannot do this work. You can't talk
yeah,
about manifestation. You can't talk about working with the energies. You can't talk about none of it without doing shadow work. And the chart
sure.
is it gives such great insight for self work.
Yeah,
And yeah, it sucks. It's not sexy to talk about self work. Shadow work sounds sexy, but really what it is just self work. And it's just really working on yourself, going to therapy.
Yeah.
It's all those not sexy things. But I mean, that's the point of the chart for
Yeah.
me, is that. So it's less
I
about,
agree.
oh, you're going to get married next year, but are those energies there for you to tighten up a partnership and have a
Mhm.
commitment? Yes, but what are you going to do to get there? Like,
I agree. I agree 100%. And, I look at some of the challenging aspects as opportunities for some of that growth. Like those are the things that are actually preparing us, if we are willing to engage with those, really, really to work through the difficult things. That's how we prepare for the great transits when they're coming our way. That's how I feel about it. This past year I had some doozies. I've got so much in the fixed signs, and the fixed signs have had it rough,
awesome.
over the last year particularly. But I felt like it was a great opportunity, like it was a great gift. Like, oh, it's my turn. I get all of this attention from the universe right now to
Love
work
it.
on myself, like to get ahead and to work on my. And I don't mean get ahead in a
Yeah.
career or financial way. I mean personally, to finally deal with some of the shit that's been in my way for my whole life.
I just love you for saying that. I do.
So, I mean, yes, we have to
True.
do part two
Yeah.
because we are
Yeah.
way, yeah.
I
So
just
we
want to
will,
shout out everybody who stuck it through, and all the wonderful comments. Thank you so much. Totally
yes.
appreciate
And
it.
we didn't even really pay that much attention to the comments, but we will try to, if there were any questions, we will look at them after and try to answer them. And we will do this again very, very soon because I feel like we could have talked all night about this.
I know. I'm like, we're not done yet. So much to talk about. Thank you so much, Lizanne, for
Thank you.
initiating
Thanks
this. I
for
look forward
joining
to
me.
more chats with you.
Me too. We will do it again real soon. So if
Okay.
anybody isn't familiar with Shadi, we'll make sure that you can find a link to her on my page and vice versa.
Vice versa. Yeah.
Yeah, and also I still have my contest for a free reading. If anybody wants to get their name in a draw, they have to subscribe to my YouTube channel and let me know when they've done it. And actually, this video will go up on YouTube, so people will be able to
Amazing.
view it
That's
there.
so generous of you, Lizanne. You're so amazing. I hope folks get on that.
Yeah, me too. So anyway, it has been such a pleasure. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
likewise.
Okay,
Have a great evening.
you too. Thanks. Bye bye.
Bye.